Are we in?
Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
No?
Can you hear us?
Yes, family.
There, we
You're
can hear
in.
you now. You wake up.
One sec. One sec. Should just fix it. All right. Yo, it's good. It's good to see you all. I miss you guys.
Oh,
We miss
we
you.
But you look nice and sunny and tan, so I don't think you're missing us that much.
Honestly,
That's a nice building that you're in there.
yeah. This is my I'm in my front in my back garden area. Let me let me put in my earphones because there's a bit of feedback. 1 second.
Quite echoey.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes.
Can't hear you guys. It's okay. Can you guys hear me well? Because
Yeah,
there's
yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
okay, cool. All right. Yeah, I wanted to have this conversation, um, partly because I'm getting FOMO from missing the show. It was one of the shows I definitely wanted to. I wish I was there to physically see it. You know,
Yeah.
I feel like the work is the type of work that um, there's a like material reality to it. You know, um, how are you feeling now that the show is on and like it's living in space and people have seen it and it's out of your studio? How are you all feeling?
I mean, you make work too. It's always good when the work gets another life beyond how you envisioned in studio. But more than that, I guess just having conversations because these pieces are very much about community and about bodies in motion, bodies coming together. So having people come and interact with the work, and being able to have the work resonate with them is it's affirming.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, obviously for me, as someone who is constantly seeing this space in flux with different shows, different works, it's always like so interesting and so enriching for me to kind of see how different shows are kind of, well, how more or less a returning audience responds to different shows. And I think, what has been so interesting about how this show has been received is that it feels very conceptually in line with the gallery's wider program, but in a way, I think aesthetically and in presentation wise, it's actually quite different in the sense that the majority of the works on display are static physical works. Yet the whole show, conceptually and physically, has been born from physicality, from movement, from formative, from this connection to sound and movement as a form of resistance, which is obviously like something that I research a lot for the program in general. So it's been very interesting to see how people have been able to connect with that through what are essentially sculptural objects, but withhold in them this liveness.
There's a potentiality.
Yeah.
The whole point of ease attention is to take the viewer away from what you think you know when you encounter Carnival. When you encounter street processions in general, but in this particular instance, I'm talking about Trinidad Carnival. So to take take the viewer away from what we call at home the pretty mass and what we all love about Carnival, which is the drunkenness and the revelry, the ability to take over the street and to isolate the undercurrent, the inner compulsion that happens when we gather for Carnival, which is a chance to witness each other existing in our body and to say to the other next to you that I know what you are going through and let us go through it together. So we take all of the strife from the year, we take the historical baggage and whatever detritus that we all pull together and carry with us collectively as a culture. We take that at Carnival and we don't actually rectify it, but we begin to tease it apart. And I think that's why it is so important for it to be an annual thing, because you never quite get to a resolution. But what you do get is a bit of a release. You get a small release and you get a chance to further understand why these repressions in your body still exist and how they impact the rest of your life outside of the Carnival space. That is the ideal of what it is, but we don't get to explore that in our cultural conversations. What we get now is the ribaldry. We get the rum and the drinking and the pretty things. And I don't get me wrong, I like that. When I play Carnival, I want a sexy costume, just like the next person. I want to be having a good time on the street, but there's another level below that, which gets overlooked.
Yeah.
That will go straight back towards the genesis of our culture as Trinidadians, the genesis of how we relate, but also I think it's a very human thing that can be seen in many different cultures as well. This need to articulate what you're going through with the way you move your body. And other spaces, other cultures, other cities, they do not have a mechanism for that. But we have preserved a mechanism for that in Trinidad. And when I took these pieces home last year, I called Valmiki Maraj, who is the creative director of Lost Tribe, and I said to him, so you are doing, I think the type of the name of the band was called Fly. Yes, Fly for Lost Tribe. Some of the pieces I'm working on now have a sort of levitational, sort of, flight type aspect to it. Would you give me a space within the band to just work out a few sort of thematic issues with what I'm doing? I didn't tell them exactly what I was doing. So of course, what I did looked nothing like what they did. But that was the point, that when I brought these sculptural works in a kinetic fashion within the mass, suddenly you realize that these pieces moved the way I moved because they were connected to my body completely, whereas everything else moved as a backdrop. And that was beautiful and effective in its own way. But it got the way I presented the work and what I was trying to isolate is this idea of being present, moving in your body, and having that be part of an ecosystem is one thing, but we don't have that anymore. So I ended up being apart from what was happening, which was the genesis of where the rest of the show came from.
I mean, to go back also and talk about Lost Tribe as well, as like a site, especially within the context of Trinidad Carnival, where as we know, it's become a very commercialized venture and festival and celebration. And there's bands like Lost Tribe that are keeping the history through storytelling, because each year they have a storyline, and they work with artists and designers and do traditional storytelling. So that as a site for your work to move as a jumping off point is so important, and it makes you think about where the context is, where you can show your work, especially in Trinidad, you know, outside of a gallery, within different spaces and time, you know.
For sure, for sure. I mean, the problem, or rather the question of how to show in non-art world-centric spaces is, I think, an issue that even here in London, there's no real answer for that, because there's this sort of top-down thinking that you need the work to be validated, basically, by the gatekeepers. Yeah, you know, somebody needs to say that this thing appeared in the right space, and then it is valid. You know, but what is the right space?
Yeah, and that's why I think it was interesting that, in a way, with this show, it kind of was flipped on its head.
Exactly.
And started not from, okay, we need to kind of have this leverage of a gallery or a white cube space first.
Yeah.
But actually, its inception was
something completely different.
Industry.
Yeah, it was industry.
And then, in a way, it gains its credibility from that, rather than from, you know, a kind of a set of people who, let's be honest, have no real connection or idea to you know,
or rather the idea they have is something that is quite different from what's the point.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's just a way of approaching making in general. Apart from Trinidadian culture or even this show, it's more a question of asking, well, who are you trying to communicate to through your work, and what is the most authentic way that you can house that communication? What's the best space for that communication to be held? Sometimes it is a white cube.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need this space, and not necessarily the literal white walls.
Yeah.
But sometimes you need a sort of an incubator to test out your ideas and to hold space, not for you and your work, but for the other people you want to converse with. But when you have, and this is how I work personally with performances, sometimes there's a little bit of slippage that happens that is not always the right slippage you want when you put the performance in this space, in this gallery space. It becomes now like a farcical thing, as opposed to revealing whatever underlying mechanisms you really want. So if I'm talking about Carnival, I'm talking about movement, I'm talking about bodies having autonomy. I think that needs to happen where other bodies are trying to get autonomy as well, whether that is down the road around the corner in Deptford or all the way back in Trinidad. Having it staged, because I could have done these works very differently. I could have mounted the work here and put on a performance.
Yeah, done a performance in the space. Yeah.
Sometimes it's really what you want to do, but for this type of work, we're asking people to consider not how you look, but how your body feels. I think I need to do that for somewhere else.
Yeah. And also, I think the, you know, there's such a complex kind of hierarchy and relationship and spatial kind of complexity in performances in galleries. And I don't know, I feel like, I mean, I've had many here, and they varied in their success, and I think that's a lot of the time has been down to kind of the play between audience.
I mean, there's a power imbalance that is struck when you do any kind of performance to begin with. When you do it in these spaces, sometimes you are not the one who is directing the interaction. Sometimes it's the viewer, and that may work for what you're trying to reveal. You know, this, however, I am talking about people who take over spaces, and you don't want to be constrained to talk about that. So what I've done instead, I thought I will go back to Trinidad. I will do this very unusual, obtuse type of performance that is going to physically, but also contextually be very different from what is being presented right now. I think like perhaps in the 80s, this type of work, from the tonality to the materials to the way it's built with very sort of traditional wire bending, Trinidadian wire bending techniques, would not have been that unusual in the 80s, because this is how most people built. this is unusual now because most people don't want to see this. What they want to see is sort of Las Vegas-y showgirl, very Instagrammable, and very individualized experience of being present in public. And I'm getting back to a space of connection in public. And I am trying to review with each of these pieces that sort of a raw energy, the raw nerves that exist in each person and how we link to each other when we are performing, when we are being present together in a public space, because that's a very different focus. It's a very different approach to parading yourself.
Yeah. Did going back to the process of wire bending as a way and process, is it a way of like reclamation for you, would you say?
Not quite. It's more affirmation of, or rather, I shouldn't even say affirmation. It's just an understanding that this kind of materiality is valid too.
Yeah.
You know? It doesn't need adornment. So the words are very Spartan. I generally make it in an abstract way because I talk a lot about the body and female autonomy in general, but I'm realizing more as my practice develops and I research more, I'm actually talking about just flesh memories, just what is held in a body. Specifically female bodies, yes, but bodies in general, we mask that and how that becomes a problem and is problematized and we can't really articulate what we are feeling, what we're going through. We use things like Carnival for that. So I peered back everything. There's no real physical representation in my book. There's one piece here in the show, Gyrate. It's a standing piece that comes closest to looking like an actual body. But all of the other works suggest some kind of physicality, or rather a sensation, an idea of, one is called gyrate, levitate, oscillate. So it's an idea of what you do with your body and how that feels. And so I peeled away all the layers. There's no real adornment. I leave just almost, if you think of it, the flesh and bones.
Yeah.
So it's just almost skeletal, this work. And that is a sort of, what's the right word? It's, I don't want to say honest, but it's just simply take it as it is. I'm not trying to adorn and pretend that it's something else. And wire bending is sort of the underlayer, the underpinning upon which everything else is thrown. Carnival, for instance, I use the underpinning as the main aspect.
And it makes me think like the actual wire as a material is the structure and what makes the costume, right? And it makes you showing the wire shows the labor in a way. And you know, I read this book actually by Daniel Childs, and she has a Daniel Childs. She has an essay about invisible hands. It's basically about the value of not showing labor and like the inherent value of that, right? And within the context of Carnival, there is a distance between the labor of Carnival, the mass camp, and the masquerader in a way, right? And even more so now where the labor is being outsourced away, bringing it down to the actual materiality of, of the costume is important.
I've included it for that purpose as well. The labor for the making, all of the making place in Carnival is usually coming from where I was born. I grew up in Laventille, in the hills, in the sort of hidden ghetto part of Trinidad, where most of the Carnival culture comes from. It's Laventille in the hills, it's Belmont around this, and it's that conversation between the two sides of the Lady Young Road, basically what's happening in Laventille, what's happening in Belmont. You can stretch it all the way up to, I would say, Sandwell, Barataria. You can go down to like the foreshore
Yeah.
That's sort of what they're now called East Port of Spain. And this is Port of Spain, basically. And it's usually very talented, very intelligent, and dexterous makers from poor income, low income backgrounds who aren't always given the chance to reap the benefits of that labor historically. And that is a story borne out in almost every other city now, but it has more disastrous effects in a post-colonial place like Trinidad. So you have these makers who are literally underpinning the entire fabric of our society. And they are making in very ingenious, usually inverted ways that aren't what other places, concept places would call the standard way of making.
Yeah.
So a lot of times on a more technical side, wire benders don't always weld. They literally join, So welding is you need particular tools for that particular access, particular income. So these are people who are continuously innovating ways to make, like literally designing new ways to create, make, and build. That is then taken and you throw a lot of feathers and crap on top of that. And you say, ta-da, here's a question. And they get pennies from that. But they are part of the whole thrust towards having their physical story be present as well. But their part is it's pushed to the side, it's very marginalized, it's very unseen. So I inverted that. I took what they did and I made it the main thing of these works. The entire structure is by bending. I don't need to adorn because to me, that labor is very much the work. It's the central part of the work. Using labor as well.
Were you able to visit? Have you visited the mass camps and
I grew up in a Carnival, so mass making, calypso, soca, all of that is just part of the backdrop of how you live. It's a funny thing living in Lavender. I mean, I'm going to school passing decimals every day. So as soon as Carnival comes around, that is the backdrop of your life. You're hearing the steel pan, somebody's tuning a pan. There'll be somebody making part of a king or queen costume in some shack next to your house. And then I went to school in Port of Spain, and almost every street between, I would say, Tragedy Road and Arapita Avenue, one of those cross streets are little mass camps. So you're walking home from school and you'll be crossing the street and you're going through London and you're going down by Oxford Circus, and then suddenly a big wire thing passes in front of you. And that's Tuesday. That's going home from school on Tuesday,
Just through osmosis, right?
What's that?
Through osmosis.
Definitely through osmosis. That is a normal thing. It's how you think. You think with making. You solve problems you articulate problems through making. Or rather you try to articulate a solution to your problem through making.
Yeah. I've question about the actual material of the use of leather.
Yeah.
What's the relationship with leather specifically, because it's a constant material that's used across your works.
For me, well, we don't have leather in Trinidad. It's not necessarily a historical thing. But it's more of a theoretical way to deal directly with the body without physically representing what a body looks like. Because I don't want, when I talk about the body, for you to think me personally. I want for you to think about you. But obviously, I'm a Caribbean, Afro, dreadlocked Trinidadian immigrant working in a very Caucasian, foreign space with all of the complexities beyond that. And the stereotypes, the different ways of thinking that clouds any real understanding, because first you have to navigate all of that. Then maybe if you're lucky, you'll get to actually talking about the thing you want to. So for me, using a material like leather as an actual skin, it holds a certain meaning. You know how it moves, you know where it came from. And I want the reality that this is a skin that once moved to be always present. And I'm talking about bodies that move and the issues that go along with that. So I use the leather as a standard, basically. And I've been using it now for many years. Basically, because at one point I lived close to a farm. And I had a chance to see animals actually being taken through that whole sort of economical process. And at the time, I was fortunate to learn how to tan leather. And there's a question of how do you discard or use this? And I thought, you know, there's something about taking just the meat and throwing away the skin. You use what you want and you discard the rest. Or you tilt it to a bag of sugar, whatever, and then you discard that too. Just like the other things physically that we discard about each other. I thought this is how I can articulate these topics without representing a form each and every time. So I want to get people to think about those inner realities as opposed to the way you look versus how I look. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah. Before, so I watched the stage a few times on the stage. Your performance that you have on loop.
Yeah.
So I played Mass this year, and
Of course you did.
And when I watched the performance, it made me think about the whole Carnival 2-day experience is a performance in itself, right? Yeah. And the stage is the, would you say, like the climax, kind of the top of the day. For some what's for the performance, why did you decide to do the performance on the stage versus the street or throughout the day? What was the stage as a site so important for the film, for the activation? Yeah.
Well, two things. One, is interesting how, like when you have Nottingham Carnival here, the main thing is really to interact with the sound systems. And you know that, it's all about the sound systems. The carnival aspect of Nottingham is sort of an ancillary thing. It happens, and ironically, that would have been the first thing that happened, being that it was launched by Trinidadian as a cultural communal, activity for West Indians and the larger London British community at that time. So it's very integral to how you experience Carnival here. But the parading happens in a different way because you parade here to have fun. Whereas in Carnival, in Trinidad, you parade to put on a guise. So the having fun part is secondary. Primary reason why you are putting on a costume in the first place is for all the masking cultures. You're putting on a costume to hide yourself or to become yourself. So you want to affirm that publicly. So for a lot of people, the stage becomes a climax. It's that time when you say out loud, this is me, I have done the whole thing. I have become who I want to be, or I have escaped who I actually am, and you have witnessed it most importantly. Because usually, whoever you are that you're trying to present or become is not witnessed or not accepted or is repressed. So Carnival is a time when you affirm, this is me. But I think by the time you reach a stage, it's actually anticlimactic. You've already passed the climax, really and truly. The stage is the saddest part because by the time you get there, you know it's done. You have to go back to your reality. So the stage is actually the saddest part of Carnival, at least for me. When you pressed around the Queen's Park Savannah and you see that stage coming, it's like the last gasp. It's like, well, tomorrow already is Ash Wednesday, isn't it?
Yeah, right.
Go back to reality.
Yeah.
The purpose of the performance, though, There's just a bit of technical aspects about it, but really I wanted to stage that part of the work on this stage because you really see a big contrast between what I'm doing and what else is happening behind.
Yeah.
And you see it more clearly there. You see how there's this big glob together, but they're actually very separate. Because everybody's individually preening as opposed to having this moment together. As am I having a moment quite separately as well. And I think that contrast is very interesting.
Lovely. I just realized I should have shared the my screen because I made a few slides.
We're talking like what, 20 minutes now?
But yeah, one sec. You can see it, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Can we read it?
Yeah. Just a couple of minutes. Okay.
That's better.
Y'all can see the screen?
Yeah, we see it now. It's good.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about this show as well. And your works from that you did at the Lightbox and also in Milan. But it touches on similar themes of labor, except within the context of motherhood. And yeah, I just wanted to learn more about, specifically like these panel pieces and also like the same use of leather as a way of representing the body now that I've learned here. And yeah, I wanted to learn more about this show and how it relates also to in conversation with your current exhibition and like what you're working on. Yeah.
I mean, on the surface, they don't relate at all. But maybe on the leather, you can say, oh, well, she used that there and there's that there. But this show was held in Milan last year with Mclaughlin Gallery at my art fair in Milan. This was highly strung. And I specifically focused on this show and talking about, the same sort of idea of flesh memories, but using the leather to encapsulate the tensile nature of repression, of holding your experience within the body and what that does to you. How is that reflected on the surface? How are the things that we think we are hiding, how do they slip out? So each of the works have this balance between a subtle, very seductive materiality and surface, but they also seem a little too pinched, a little too constrained in some areas. And you can imagine this thing bursting or oozing, but they don't quite get there. And I love working in that space because to me, that's a space of both potential and suggestibility. I am never trying to tell you how you feel, but I love to when I do these panels, I love to peek in the corner and see how people interact with them because sometimes people come up and they try to twerk the leg. They pass their fingers on it and everybody's watching. And sometimes people get very uncomfortable and none of these words, especially the ones that are wall reliefs, the leather on the canvas, the rolling, none of them really physical. They don't really show you what the shape is.
Yeah.
They just feel suggestive. They feel a little like you've seen something you shouldn't. But everybody else is looking at it, so it can't be that bad, And that's really the place where female bodies exist. In a place of no autonomy, a place that exists for being lusted, desired, and manipulated. So a lot of the times when I use leather, I'm getting towards that sensation.
Yeah. Are these sewn on? So I'm putting on my just out of curiosity, like the technical aspect of it. Is
Okay.
it yeah, is this sewn on? How
Yes,
do you
the each works are hand sewn. The labor aspect of it is important as well for technical reasons, because I wanted to always hold that tension. And I want
yeah,
that tension to be sustained. I want
yeah,
it to really look as if this thing can burst at any minute. And to be honest, sometimes they do. But I want you to feel that sort of almost rise of a surface that you want to smack, that you want to caress, but it already looks like it has been caressed too much. And now when you feel that desire, what is that saying about how you are interacting with this surface? How do you interact with other surfaces? Human surfaces, female surfaces in similar ways. So yeah, these are sewn. The labor aspect of it is important as well because I want to do it, but I want you to see that this is a repetitive, monotonous, slow work. It could be done faster. It can be done in a myriad of different ways, but the material moves in a certain way when it is sewn. And you see that, and you feel the prick as well of each needle point going through the surface, and you see as well the mark of that having happened. So nothing is hidden in work like this.
yeah, it's the visibility of labor, you know. I think it's so important. Um, you don't want to have this distance between the actual output and the labor. I think it's so important um to show that. Um,
Yeah, it is. It's really important in my practice. If I'm speaking about the way that women's bodies and their experiences are tokenized, dismissed, but also highly utilized and important within our economies of labor, that the
yeah,
words themselves have a duality about them. So my words, I attempt to have my words be seductive, but also to show you the labor.
yeah, beautiful. And the the sculpture at the bottom here.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, can you walk me through it? So it's a this is yeah, can you walk me through the sculpture?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is one of my favorite. It's actually my kid's balance bag.
What?
It's a balance bag, actually. Well, it used to be once upon a time a balance bag. That book held, let me see if I can guide you to the link for that because it has a very funny little video, a little film work that goes along with that. And I'll send it to you on a link if I can. 1 second. 1 second, 1 second. But yeah, basically that work, again, with the materials, if I'm talking about a particular kind of label, instead of me making something new to tell you about it,
Yeah,
I will just direct you to where that label
yeah.
occurs.
I think it's interesting as well, like, you know, when you were talking about this like actual physical tension within the woolworks of the show in Milan, and in kind of comparing it to this show, in a way, obviously, other than the title itself, it does feel like there's been a bit of a material release within this show as well, because I think, you know, I think what the wire bending also does is present negative space, which is not necessarily present in these wall works. And I think there's that fullness and that tautness that really presents that tension. Whereas with the works here,
it's diffused.
The leather is not only much more kind of not free, because it's not actually, but there's much more kind of fluidity within it. But I think, you know, a lot of people have in the show have kind of picked up on this sort of empty space that this wire bending has made, and kind of, you know, how the sort of energy of the movement can move through it. Which I think, you know, with more wall-based works, it's harder to kind of penetrate the film.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why
Yeah.
I said, the words seem unrelated, but they actually are. It's like two sides of the coin.
Yeah.
In one case, everything is constrained, and in the other hand, everything is more diffused. It's more diffused.
Yeah.
The grace work, the work with the balance bag is called grace, actually. I can't find the film for it, the film work. But again, with the idea of both tension and release, this particular show was held at the Lightbox Gallery. And a lot of the works here deal with motherhood. They deal with that particular aspect of feminine repression that happens in motherhood that is tokenized as valid labor, but also unseen labor. And so I take objects from my everyday experience. So on the, I guess, the left side to the bottom there, that piece is actually my mother's bag. It's a carry-on. That piece is called carry-on. You don't see it from the picture, but inside is an anvil that weights the work down. And you can read into that as you would, but I have a piece that is basically the existence of every mother's life. They carry all of everything, but it's not just the things that you take for the practical reasons of care, but it's the everything else that you're expected to be burdened with, but also okay with. And you hold it inside. You repress these realities, but you're also expected to function. And these objects are all non-functioning objects that should function. Just the main arc of it. So it's a balance like that cannot be written, it cannot be used, but it still has that gesture of repetitive, unyielding, unending motion.
Yeah, beautiful. That's essentially it. That's all that I have at the moment.
Great.
But so how long is the show going to be on for? Is it gonna? Have you guys extended it?
Just till this Saturday.
Yeah. This is the last hurrah down to the end.
Yeah.
It's been good. It's been really interesting to see, as you said earlier, Louis, works that have this potential for movement.
Yeah.
But the space feels very dynamic, even though it's very, still objects.
Yeah, I mean, I think even just from a kind of basic curatorial, like in the space element, this rhythm of up and down, and kind of there's almost this. It's almost like an electricity that runs between each of the works, and they are very connected. And I think it's kind of heightened because of each work is named after a sort of instruction in a way. They're kind of, it's playing out in motion, almost reading like a kind of comic strip across from left to right. It's like you kind of you follow the rhythm essentially of the works, and but I think for me what's been one of the most interesting discussions that has come up time and time again with people in the space who are not, most people are not familiar with the specificities of Trinidad Carnival. And I think a lot of people assume that carnivals are across the world are quite similar, in their kind of inception. I mean, I suppose in their inception they are in the base level. But I think, when just like going back to what you were saying about Notting Hill Carnival, I mean, for most people in the UK, that's their only experience of a carnival. And it's very evident to people when they were coming into the space before they necessarily, read the text or spoke to me or whatever, but just kind of being within the space that actually this show was getting at something else, and this was offering a kind of a different avenue to explore with, how this celebration, how this joy is actually layered and far more impactful and powerful than just beyond its surface level.
It is. It's sometimes it's bogged down a lot by the sociopolitics, which should never be overlooked. But there's an aspect of it at the very core that is simply fundamental movement. And that fundamental core is denigrated. It's uncomfortable to see people moving.
And it's not that it's uncomfortable for.
I'm saying that the core of what I'm touching on, the fact that bodies want to move, bodies want to rub up on each other, bodies want to be free. That's a very uncomfortable, it's so simple to say it. But it's so uncomfortable to do. You know, it's always funny. For instance, I love to go to Notting Hill and just stand to see when people who I know, I can tell they're not Londoners. Because even if someone is not like Afro-Caribbean or even familiar with Carnival culture, if they are a Londoner, they're probably into some kind of a raving party, something. So you hear music, you see people, they'll get into it. But when they're non-Londoners, I could see them at the side of the road and they kind of want to get into it. But this person's butt. I was like, it's an uncomfortable thing. This is not even just a celebration, it's just an affirmation that that is normal. And that is good. It's good.
I think they're kind of, when people feel uncomfortable, there's, you know, it's a lack of understanding of like the fundament, like the reason, the purpose of being there, you know. That's why it's so important to, especially when it comes to Carnival, for like your entry point. Like, remember, a lot of people's entry point into, for example, Nottingham Carnival, even Trinidad Carnival, is purely for the party or for the road, you know?
Like today, for instance, because it's oh my goodness, that is too far now. It's crazy. You know, absolutely, you're definitely onto something there.
And when you know, when these people are in a space with people who also understand Carnival, you can see that there's a distance and there's a bit of a tension, because you need some, you know, a fundamental understanding of, you know, why you're in the space, and then you can go and dance and, you know, and
it's almost like your permission if you're not accustomed with this type of physical lexicon, which is what I'm working with. You need somebody to tell you that it's okay to go and wind that person. It's okay to feel that beat and to just do what your body is saying to do in the streets. Now, obviously, I'm not saying to go attack anybody, I'm not saying that, but that compulsion to simply release yourself is very foreign to many people.
And especially in a public space as well. Because I think, you know, there's, as you touched on, with rave culture and stuff like that, and even sound system culture separate to the Carnival, you know, there's a whole history of kind of, you know, having that cathartic release through movement and sound, but often it's within these sort of controlled environments where you are knowing that you're entering into a space where this is kind of deemed, you know, the thing to do. And actually, you know, I think particularly from you know, the context of Notting Hill, sorry to go back to that, but that's all I personally have a direct experience with. Well, if you think about like what?
Next year you'll be coming out for Carnival, so
next year I'm coming, for sure, but you know, if you think about the context of you know what Notting Hill is now, and the extreme gentrification that's happened since when it started, and all the, you know, all the issues around it now, you know, being people wanting it to be moved to elsewhere, and so not only are you having to kind of overcome this thing of being in a public space, but there's also this resistance from the people that own the land that you're on now. So there's all these kind of, you know, local kind of complexities that will act out, whether you're in Spain, whether you're in London, whether you're in Salvador, wherever, you know, there is this universal thing that connects, but then there's also these kind of underlying.
They're more like there's some specificities depending on where the carnival came from, what the history is around that. For this show, being static and dynamic at the same time, we use sound as well in the space.
Exactly, yeah.
And I made a soundscape because I thought it was really important, even though these objects they aren't embodied, they are in life. You know, and that's a little distinction that I felt would be better access through music as well. So I made 3 soundscapes to go along with these words. And one of them in particular is it uses a track by Mclaughlin, Trinidadian, brilliant musician, singer, songwriter, producer from the 60s, 70s, some sort of father, a rapper in Trinidad, and the sound was called Carnival. And it's very long, so I suggest anybody who's not familiar with Lansing, you find Lansing on YouTube or Spotify, and find Carnival, because the track itself is like 30 minutes. But in the track, at the very beginning, he starts off in Rhapsody, in that cadence, talking about the genesis of Trinidad's Carnival. And I used that clip in the soundscape that I made. And so in just like 8 bars, 12 bars, very quickly, he wraps up the whole thing. He says, you know, it comes from the Carnival riots of the 1700s, 1800s, in colonial era Trinidad, pre-emancipation, pre-independence. You're still having enslaved peoples on plantations. And as you said, rave culture nowadays, club culture is the same cathartic release indoors amongst your kin.
Yeah.
You know, but Carnival in Trinidad in particular is to have that release in your face.
Yeah.
So the whole point of it is to do this very physical release in public, in the place where you don't want it to be. You know, and I'm going to have fun doing it. The exact thing you told me not to do, I'm going to go do that. I'm going to do it publicly, and we are all going to join together, and we're going to not receive permission, but we are going to take permission and share it with each other. And we're going to do this thing publicly. And he spends like the whole song going through what it means from then for people enslaved in Trinidad to basically riot, to cause a riot for their rights to beat the drums and to have their own cultural celebration, and their frustration and their sort of the indignation. You know what, screw you. I go, you know what, I can't do it behind here in the plantation. You want to ban the drumming? Take this, I'm in the streets. So that's basically the attitude. Off in the streets I go, and we are going to have our family riots take over everything, and it goes through generation to what we have now, that is this watered, you know, thumb and bikini feathered thing that somewhere on the bottom is the same compulsion to witness each other in public. You know, but the public part of it is important, because we could do this in a stadium.
It just wouldn't. I think that's, and I think that is such an essential element of it just couldn't exist in that same way. But like, but I just think also on a very basic level of the fact that it continues to happen in that way every year. And, you know, you used the word preservation earlier, and I think just on a very base level for something like that to mobilize on the scale that it does, that is, you know, largely driven by the people. It's people. You know,
people give permission for Carnival to happen,
but
and they make it happen.
They make it happen, and I think, you know, for that not to have really, obviously it's changed its face, of course, but to have that essence remain and have that still pushing it forward year on year, I think it's fantastic.
I mean, no, that's not to say it doesn't have its problems.
Of course, and I think it would be ludicrous to assume that anything of that.
That's a whole different show for a whole different topic.
But
the fact that it exists too, and that we still understand that apart from the history, apart from the politics, apart from all of those repressions, this is simply our way of saying, I see you.
Yeah.
I see you.
Yeah.
And I want you to see you.
I mean, it's inherited, you know, the the um, the carnival, the process, you know, going, you know, what carnival, when I think about it, carnival as a protest, and that protest is inherited generation to generation. As you said, like it's almost a phenomena that, you know, year by year it happens and it exists. Um, and but it's so important that we continue to talk about the reason why it exists, to keep it moving forward, you know? Um, and honestly, it's a beautiful thing. It's such a beautiful thing. Um, yeah. But yeah, so I'm gonna stop sharing the screen here. And one sec. If I see Zarna's here. Zarna, if you have any questions, or feel free to um to send them in. And yeah, she sent a heart.
She was here on the weekend if we had it.
Oh, will the soundscapes be available? Like, will you be sharing them?
I think I'm gonna do like a playlist, and I will indeed share them because quite a few people mentioned that they'd never heard. Well, I guess the way it was edited, but it's not just the editing, it's that kind of music from Trinidad.
Yeah.
You hear Calypso and you think jump on it, you're just hardcore. Like,
Yeah.
you know, that's one thing, but there's this other music that is carnival music as well. You know, rap, so definitely is straight carnival.
Yeah, yeah. And it's something that was picked up a lot on with people coming into the space. And yeah, I think it's I always encourage for the sound pieces to be shared.
I will share
them. Because actually it's interesting, like I probably shouldn't say this in live, but I will. Being in a gallery, obviously every week on week, most of my shows have sound pieces.
Yeah.
And you know, no matter how brilliant they are, after a while, you're like, you know, I mean, I know every note of my heart singing along. But actually, there was something, I think, something about these pieces that kind of
drive me crazy.
Yeah, I mean, because I think it did so kind of seamlessly fill the space of the works, and you know, it was just sort of there chugging along in the background. And I think it was, you know, was not intended to be, you know, the main work of the show. But
the thread that runs through
it is. And when you remove it, you really notice it.
Yeah.
So
I will share them.
Yeah.
Well done, sending. I'm trying to hear that. But what I would say, and I just had a thought about the rap soul, that as a genre has developed into, I would say, Trinidad, and you know, in a way, you know,
Trinidad.
in Trinidad dancehall. Huh?
I don't see anything wrong with that. I know people are currently debating its validity.
So for your next show, I'm trying to hear Trinidad in the gallery at the show. I say we did.
I think it will. I mean, look, all of these different genres are touching on the same compulsions, you know. So people reacting to Trinidad and Zest nowadays are the same kinds, the same feeling of people reacting to when Bayesian started making faster soca.
Yeah.
And it was good, let's be frank. It was good, but it was not the pace of Calypso. And everybody was like, oh my God, they're changing the Calypso. It ain't gonna be good no more. And it was great. And now you struggle to get slow. calypsos. To the point now where there's this genre of new calypso, which is basically the tempo of the old calypso come back now. So Trinidad Zest is just the more recent incarnations of how, I guess, Trinidadian culture mixes with Jamaican culture, mixes with, I guess, rap, the Trinidadians in the diaspora as well. You know, so hey, it's good music.
Yeah, it's just evolved, you know?
Yeah.
Evolved in that way. It's all the Trinidad and and right now the zest, like the zest. Good, but it's all a mix.
No, I know.
Oh my goodness, I'll send you some zest. It's very exciting.
We would love the zest of the zest music. But really it's a mix between, you know, I would even like the rap soul, the clips of the dance soul, and also regionally, Jamaican dancehall, Bayesian soca. It's just a mix into one, you know. And also reggaeton. Now that we have this kind of new migration, you know, of Venezuelan. Okay, so the sound is completely changing. And yeah, sound is completely changing, and now the identity of the music is changing because the country's identity is changing as well, you know.
But this is the nice thing about Trinidad. On a good day, on a bad day, Trinidad is Trinidad of the news, which we leave that there. On a good day, however, Trinidad is an open arm kind of country. So after we get on foolish and say all these stupid xenophobic things that unfortunately many Trinidadians, like many people everywhere else, are just as xenophobic, and they have moments when they can be racist and very stupid. But the one thing that saves us is eventually we catch ourselves and we say, hey, but this thing have some work. This is actually interesting. Bring what you have and put it in the Trinidadian pot. And then suddenly it just now becomes a bigger pot. So the Trinidadian pot is always growing. And there's always space for somebody to bring what they have and put it in that pot. So it is never just one dominant thing. It is all of our things. So yeah, Venezuelans coming will start making the newer version of Paran that will influence Calypso and, you know,
Yeah. It's only, it makes sense, you know? Only right.
But that is on a good day. As I said, that is the ideal on a good day. We understand that doesn't happen all the time.
Yeah.
But there's always that compulsion for Trinidadians to open arms and welcome stuff in. And I hope that doesn't go away.
Yeah. It's definitely a country, just to end it, but it's definitely a country of migration, you know? Everyone's from everything.
Absolutely no, you know, I mean, there are a few like Amerindians and poor First Peoples, Taínos, Calinanos and stuff, you know. I mean, my grandmother was Amerindian, but the rest of my family is from Barbados, St. Vincent, and St. Kitts, you know, so like.
It's a mix, but that's also tied into the labor, you know, people coming in. That's a whole other.
Oh, that's a long
all the conversation. But yeah, honest, I had such a good time talking to you guys.
Thank you.
I'll be coming back to London in a month or so.
So you build that in a month or so.
Well, we look forward to your return.
Yeah. And yeah, so this is recorded, so I'll send you
Fantastic. I can link it onto the gallery website and stuff.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Brian.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, for organizing.
Of course. Thank you, Zona, for coming. I appreciate you.
Of course. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.